Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Thursday, November the 25th, 2021. First off, a very happy Thanksgiving to all of my American friends. And speaking of Thanksgiving, where is President Brandon today? Well, here's a story from Emily Gooden at the Daily Mail. Scranton Joe ups his game. President rents his billionaire private equity friend David Rubenstein's $30 million Nantucket compound for Thanksgiving, where a rock on the front lawn reads, "I'd rather be working." Witty, huh? Like Biden, Rubenstein grew up in a middle class blue collar family and originally started his career in government service. But he left that path to form a private equity company that would make him a billionaire many times over. Yes, it's an old story. Get in with the government, make lots of influential friends, and then start your own company and get very rich indeed. Along the way, Rubenstein made friends with the rich and powerful on both sides of the political aisle. George H.W. Bush was an advisor to his company, while Jimmy Carter is a close friend who's also stayed at Rubenstein's Nantucket home. And the billionaire businessman has even admitted his regrets and financial losses that include turning down opportunities from Mark Zuckerberg to invest in Facebook and from Jeff Bezos to invest in Amazon. Rubenstein's company, the private equity firm, the Carlyle Group, worth $293 billion, has come under fire at times for its business practices. But Rubenstein, who has a net worth of $4.5 billion, according to Forbes, has reshaped his image, become one of the most visible philanthropists in the world, buying copies of the Magna Carta and the Emancipation Proclamation in what he's called acts of patriotic philanthropy. Yes, much like Arthur Sackler and the rest of that family. And I will discuss them on the book club tomorrow. The book Empire of Pain. Rubenstein, 72, was back in the spotlight this week after it was revealed the first couple, along with their kids and a gaggle of grandkids, arrived on Nantucket Tuesday night to spend the Thanksgiving holiday at Rubenstein's private compound on the posh island. Rubenstein is in Europe, according to local reports. The Bidens are staying at Rubenstein's $20 million, 13-acre compound on Nantucket Harbor. Biden has previously stayed at Rubenstein's place on Nantucket, including in 2014 when he was vice president. The Bidens are paying rent, but it's unclear how much. Somehow I don't think that it's the market rate. Rubenstein bought the waterfront property in 2000 for his now ex-wife Alice and their 3 children. He tore down the existing house, but of course, and built about a 13,000 square foot home, which features a tennis court, swimming pool, and private dock. Rubenstein has reportedly boasted to friends that he only spends 12 days a year at the Nantucket estate. A rock on his front lawn reads, "I'd rather be working." It was unwise of Mr. Rubenstein to boast that he only spends 12 days a year at his Nantucket estate. That's the sort of thing that makes people hate rich people. Oh, and Hunter Biden was there. But of course, got to get the whole family together. White House Press Secretary not Jennifer, but Jen, defended the first couple's stay on the island off the coast of Massachusetts amid soaring prices where ordinary Americans are struggling to pay for their Thanksgiving dinners. Psaki said food prices weren't that high, and everyone should spend the holiday with loved ones. The White House stressed the Bidens have been going to Nantucket for 46 years, since before Biden was a senator. The first couple are scheduled to return to the White House Sunday. This is a time to put politics aside, spend time with your loved ones, and talk about what you're grateful for, Psaki said. She added that Biden will be working from the island, where he is known as Joe by locals, due to how often he visits. He will conduct his work from wherever he is on any vacation at any time, Psaki said. He has secure phone capabilities. He has staff traveling with him. Okay, so Joe Biden has an official residence, the White House. There's also Camp David. Why couldn't he spend Thanksgiving at one of these two places? Why does he have to swan off to a billionaire's compound? Hmm? Or the luxury that he has been afforded is not good enough for him? Psaki said that food prices weren't that high. There are an abundance of turkeys available. They're about $1 more for a 20-pound bird, which is a huge bird if you're feeding a very big family. And that's something that, again, we've been working to make sure people have more money in their pockets to address, Psaki said. Biden ran for president as a symbol and representative of the middle class, ho ho, very satirical, and has come under fire for staying at the home of Rubenstein, whose company, the Carlyle Group, has been the subject of controversy and conspiracy theories. Private equity companies are companies that take struggling companies that are not traded on the stock exchange and raise cash, which they then reinvest in those companies with the goal of making them profitable. These firms would then try to get a handsome return on their investment by either offering the company to the public, which can buy shares, selling the company, or recapitalization. Yes. And David Rubenstein. Let's see. He's got the juice. He's the chairman of the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, former chairman of the Smithsonian Institution, chairman of the Council on Foreign Relations, and president of the Economic Club of Washington, D.C. More about President Brandon here. This is from Wendell Husbo at Breitbart. President Biden tweeted Wednesday that supermarket shelves are well stocked across the country while grocers ration food. For all those concerns a few weeks ago that there would not be ample food available for Thanksgiving, families can rest easy today, Biden claimed. Grocery stores are well stocked with turkey and everything else you need. Meanwhile, Publix Supermarkets, a Florida-based grocer, warned customers this week to expect food shortages in all 1,280 stores across the Southeast. According to the Orlando Sentinel, the list of rationed foods include the following: canned cranberry sauce, jarred gravy, canned pie filling, canola and vegetable oil, cream cheese, bacon, rolled breakfast sausage, paper napkins, disposable plates, cups and cutlery, bath tissue, refrigerated snacks, that is to say Lunchables style items, sports drinks, aseptic type juices such as Capri Sun, canned cat food in variety packs, and refrigerated pet food. NBC's South Florida affiliate reported the empty shelves are not set to be restocked anytime soon, nor are the food shortages just confined to holiday foods. The limits are for all stores in our 7-state operating area, a Publix representative said. There is not a set time determined for these items, and the list can change to include more items or remove items. Though Publix has not rationed turkeys, Winn-Dixie, another massive grocer, has rationed the turkeys. Food costs have skyrocketed in recent months. Breitbart reported the price of turkey has increased by more than 24% from 2020. In total, Thanksgiving in 2021 will cost American families 14% more. Well, if the price of turkey has increased by more than 24% from 2020, that would mean that Jen Psaki was telling a whopper. But of course, she is well familiar with that. This is from Charlie Spearing at Breitbart. President Biden promoted his efforts to lower gas prices on Tuesday, but he reminded Americans they would save more money on gas if they owned electric cars. Yes, I guess if you own an electric car, you won't need to buy any gas. For the hundreds of thousands of folks who bought one of those electric cars, they're going to save $800 to $1,000 in fuel costs this year, Biden said, referring to the $112,595 electric Hummer pickup he test drove at a General Motors factory in Detroit earlier this year. Yes, I wonder how many Americans can afford a car that costs $113,000. And what the maintenance costs, all the way up and down, are yearly for a car that costs that much. The president appeared frustrated that some Americans continue blaming his environmental agenda for higher gas prices, dismissing it as a myth. My effort to combat climate change is not raising the price of gas. What it's doing is increasing the availability of jobs. Let's do that. Let's beat climate change with more extensive innovation and opportunities, Biden said, claiming the economy would be less vulnerable to these kinds of price hikes on fossil fuels. Where does Joe Biden think that electricity comes from? From lightning, perhaps? The president notably suspended all federal leases on oil and gas and shut down the Keystone XL pipeline after taking office, which hurt the amount of domestic oil production, which was on a steady rise in the U.S. when former President Donald Trump was in office until the coronavirus pandemic hit. And, let's see. Bill Kristol weighs in on this. This is from Pam Key at Breitbart during Wednesday's newsroom on CNN. Political commentator Bill Kristol argued that people should realize there was no Thanksgiving last year, given the COVID pandemic, before they complained about inflation causing soaring food prices this year. Oh, there was no Thanksgiving last year? Is that true? I don't think that that's true. Next, they're going to tell us that there was no Christmas last year either. Kristol said, I think they are crazy enough to try to take more credit for what the progress has been on COVID and keep hammering that. And frankly, to criticize Republicans who have not helped get more people vaccinated, get more people boosted, get more kids vaccinated. We're turning the corner on that, despite the upsurge in the last month or so. Fewer are dying, and those who are dying, unfortunately, are the unvaccinated. So Biden should say, think where we were a year ago. Give a little credit for President Trump for getting the thing going a year and a half ago. But people are taking that good news for granted, and they are focusing on the bad news of inflation. Guest host Caitlin Collins said, but they're going to the grocery store and paying so much more. I think the president has tried to make the argument about what happened a year ago. Kristol responded that Thanksgiving dinner costing 40 cents more per person. There were no Thanksgiving dinners a year ago. Why? Because the pandemic was raging and there was no vaccine. Shouldn't people have that in mind as they complain about things costing, 40 cents more this year? One gets the impression that Bill Kristol does not do his own shopping. I know. It sounds shocking. Bill Kristol has a very good friend called Molly Jong Fast, who is the daughter of a smutty novelist who was quite popular in the 1970s, Erica Jong, who wrote a book called Fear of Flying, which introduced us to the term, sorry for the crudity, the zipless F. This is from Alex Griffin at Mediate. Author and journalist Molly Jong Fast, once again a very close friend of Bill Kristol's, said Wednesday that after being dragged on Twitter for a joke in one of her recent articles, she had to call the FBI because of all the death threats I'm getting. Jong Fast noted that her need to call the FBI was ironic, given the fact that the quip in her article entitled Deprogramming Your Relatives This Thanksgiving read, quote, maybe you will have a change of heart, or maybe you'll need to report a relative to the FBI, unquote. Yes, it's just a joke. Just a joke at the same time that we learned that the Department of Justice is sicking the FBI on people who have the audacity to complain about policies at school board meetings. Yes, just a joke. Mediaite reached out to Jong Fast for comment, and she confirmed that she's been getting a lot of death threats and had indeed reported them to the FBI. It's so scary, she said, reiterating again, or repeating, as normal people would say, that it was a joke and it was meant to be funny. The article, the subhead of which has since been changed, was from Jong Fast's newly launched newsletter for The Atlantic. She emphasized that the comment about calling the FBI was meant as a joke and not a suggestion that anyone should actually call the FBI after having turkey dinner together. It's really horrible, she added, noting that a thread about it has popped up on 4chan, a part of the dark web, rife with conspiracy theories and far-right figures. She explained her article centered around research she had seen suggesting it was possible to convince your relatives to get vaccinated, and had found that hopeful. But instead, now people want to kill me. Oh, and who sticks up for her? Oh, Major Tom Nichols, because she wrote a newsletter post with a joke at the end of it. The right-wing tactic in the new age of constant bullying to menace everyone else into silence while claiming themselves to be the victims of canceling. Yes, it's always projection from these people. Always projection. It's a humor piece, she repeated in a response to Sohrab Ahmari, who had said, "Happy Thanksgiving, Molly Jong-Fast. You're totally normal and not deranged. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Right-wing figures piled on criticism. Former Trump lawyer Jenna Ellis called Jong-Fast a useful idiot. And let's go to the chat. Dionysus says, KMG, who do you like more, William F. Buckley or Gore Vidal? I was one of the, Buckley kids in the 60s and 70s. I discovered him on TV. I guess his, the infamous pair-up of him and Gore Vidal during the Democratic Convention in 1968, which just exploded into a profane cat fight. Gore Vidal, I don't know. He said some, he was, I suppose he was a good writer, except that his novels are obsessed with homosexuality. And he was a thoroughly depraved man. Hello to Head McNeck. Happy Thanksgiving, Kevin and fam, indeed. Hello to Anram, Popcasso88, Adan, Kontiki Roulette. Oh, let's see. When will... Yes, okay, all right. Someone, Mark Butterworth pointed out to me that I'm mispronouncing the name of the city in Wisconsin where there was that SUV incident, and I'll talk about that. Apparently it's Waukesha. Okay, now I've been instructed. I have a lot of trouble with, certain American place names because they're not pronounced the way one might expect. Years ago, I took a Greyhound bus trip from New York City to Seattle. And as we were passing through North Dakota, I mentioned to fellow passengers the name of a place called Minot. And I thought, well, it's obviously a French name, so it would be pronounced Minot. And they all looked at me blankly. And then someone mentioned Minot. Oh, that's how it's pronounced? Okay. Of course, there is a city in South Dakota spelled Pierre, which is pronounced Pierre and not Pierre. Dan says, I hope someone's keeping the kids away from Brandon's legs. You may have seen that video where President Brandon just a couple of days ago started to poke at a child. Who does that? Who goes up to a strange child and starts poking at it? The little girl almost slugged him. It was a close call. She, made this gesture and nearly smacked him in the face, which would have been, golly. Imagine if he'd fallen to the ground and died. That would have been bizarre. Hello to John S. and Dan. Fiddling while Rome burns, says Pelcasso88. Waukesha was a 90s sitcom starring R&B singer Brandy, says Pelcasso88. Okay. Hello to respectable commenting name. Pelcasso88 said, to be honest, I didn't know how to pronounce it correctly until you pointed it out. Hello to Quachalongo. They want to take cats away now as long-term carriers. Oh, I don't know where that comes from. Uh, let's see. On the campaign trail, Biden was seen talking to Jeeps. That was incredibly weird, says Kontiki Roulette. Upper Midwestern place names are confusing for us coastal rubes, says Hauper. Yes, the real interesting KMG pronunciation is gibberish. Okay, it's supposed to be pronounced gibberish. I don't know. I like the hard G. The hard G is funny. And I've been mispronouncing it for decades now, and I'm not about to change. Hauper says, I'm sure it's Indian or First Nations, as Kevin might say. No, we don't call them First Nations anymore. We call them Aboriginal or Indigenous. Indigenous is the latest word. And if you call them anything other than Indigenous, you might get into trouble in my country. All right. KMG didn't answer the question of who I like better. Didn't Kevin call Buckley a creep more than once on the stream, says Ann Run. Yes, he was a creep. In many ways. He was a relentless social climber. And his treatment of so many people who work for him, including Joe Sobran, was absolutely appalling. Oh, I see. I'll just throw this person under the bus because I don't want to anger my rich, powerful friends. Sobran once said that he once told Buckley that he needed to understand the difference between an employee and a serf. And I've mentioned, these obituaries that he would write about people such as Eric von Kuhnelt-Ledin, who put in many years of loyal service to National Review and were treated mockingly in his obits. Weren't there rumors about Buckley being gay, says Palcasso88? Yes, I have seen them. Respectable commenting name says something about this. Hello to Kyle Free. I appreciate your greeting. Kevin has been mispronouncing concatenation this whole time. Really? There's a lake in Minnesota, says Jim Smith, called L'Homme Dieu, pronounced La Hamadou. Okay. Yes, he threw Sobran under the bus, but you should read about how he treated his own family to capture just how much of a creep he was, says a respectable commenting name. Double vax Canadian icon Brian Adams caught COVID again. Must mean the vax really worked, says Dan. Is this true? I'm just, hang on just a second here. Let's see if he's in the news here. Oh, man. This is from Jeremy Bailey at The Wrap. Brian Adams has tested positive for COVID-19 for the second time in a month. He was in Milan to promote the 2022 issue of the famed Pirelli calendar, in which his photography was featured and tested positive upon arriving. He posted several photos to Instagram with the news, one of which shows him on an ambulance. On an ambulance, or perhaps in an ambulance. Just arrived in Milano, and I've tested positive for the second time in a month for COVID. He wrote, so it's off to the hospital for me. Thanks for all your support. Okay, he went to the hospital. Did he have symptoms? Last month, Adams' representatives confirmed he had previously tested positive for COVID-19 and said he was fully vaccinated. He had no symptoms then, his reps said. The Pirelli calendar, my father was in the car business, and I think one year he got a copy of one of these coveted calendars, which is kind of which used to be risque photography of beautiful women. And then a few years ago, the Pirelli company decided, no, who wants to look at beautiful women? Let's put old and ugly women in our calendar. Because that's the sort of thing one does nowadays. Head McNexus, it has a soft C, the second one. Concatenation. Okay, well, thank you for that. Cuts like a knife, says Dan. Yes. Brian Adams. I had a friend years ago, and well, no, Brian Adams worked with this songwriter Jim Vallance for years, and Jim Vallance is a rich man because of his songwriting partnership with Brian Adams. And I had a friend in the music business, and one day Vallance said, "Would you like to, write songs with me?" And my friend said no. Brian Adams, I don't like his stuff. It's okay. I mean, he's very good at what he does. Let's put it that way. Didn't sound like he needs a hospital, says John S. Coachulango, Pygmalion starring KMG. The only time he can get in the news, I would suggest, is Kon-Tiki Roulette. No, I'm not going to mock Brian Adams. He's had a career, going back to the 1970s. And he was very good to the engineer, the Vancouver engineer, Ron Vermeulen, who calls himself Ron Obvious. Ron Obvious would record all of these punk bands in Vancouver on off time at Little Mountain Studios for free, because he was a staff engineer there, as was Bob Rock, who later became, well, huge in the producer's game. And I once saw Ron Obvious and Bob Rock. They were in the lobby of Little Mountain Studios, and they were both on the floor with their heads up to a speaker, listening to the song I Can See for Miles by The Who, and they were having this passionate argument about whether equalization had been used on the song. Very serious about sound they were. There's a story here from Rebecca Mansour in Breitbart. This year marks the 400th anniversary of the first Thanksgiving celebrated by our Pilgrim fathers and mothers in 1621. If this fact is news to you, I'm not surprised. After all, there was very little fanfare last year to celebrate the 400th anniversary of the Pilgrims' arrival at Plymouth, Massachusetts in 1620, an event which President John Quincy Adams described as the birthday of our nation. But that seminal moment in world history passed with barely a mention. This year, you'll see more about the inflated price of Thanksgiving dinner than about the 400th anniversary of the holiday. And while it's true that Bidenflation has made this year's turkey feast the most expensive in living memory, no one who knows the true history of the first Thanksgiving can ever doubt that the Pilgrims paid a greater price for their meal than anything we ever will. But you would have to know their story to understand that, and these days the Pilgrims are being airbrushed out of our cultural memory. The same wokesters who are busy removing Thomas Jefferson's statue from New York City Hall have unfairly maligned our Pilgrim fathers and reframed the history of the nation they founded. There appear to be few commemorations, parades, and festivals to celebrate the Pilgrims this year, in fact, because revisionist charlatans of the radical left have lately claimed the previous year as America's true founding, Senator Tom Cotton said last year. The revisionist charlatans he was referring to are the authors of the New York Times 1619 Project, which commemorates the year that the first ship arrived in the Virginia colony carrying African slaves. Recognizing the significance of the 400th anniversary of the beginning of American slavery is certainly worthwhile, but the 1619 Project's authors went beyond recognition and sought to reframe all American history around the events of 1619. For this, they have been roundly criticized by historians who decry their many inaccuracies and revisionist interpretations, including, for example, their claim that the American Revolution was fought in order to preserve slavery in the colonies. Much of the criticism is focused on the project's controversial claim, which was later scrubbed from the New York Times website, that 1619 is the year of our true founding, not 1620, when the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth and planted the seed of our democracy that ripened in 1776. In a Times op-ed rebutting the critics, Nicholas Guyat argues that the 1619 Project radically challenges a core narrative of American history by refuting the notion that the story of the United States is a gradual unfolding of freedom. Instead, the project's authors describe a nation in which racism is persistent and protean. White supremacy shape shifts through the nation's history, finding new forms to continue the work of subjugation and exclusion. In other words, they think that Abraham Lincoln got it wrong when he said our nation was conceived in liberty, they think it was conceived in racism. And with the push to incorporate the 1619 Project and critical race theory into school curriculums, these woke revisionists are hard at work rewriting our history one school kid at a time, just as they've been busy for years reframing the history of the Pilgrims and Thanksgiving. America's teachers have begun a slow complex of unlearning the widely accepted American narrative of Thanksgiving, according to Education Week. To unlearn the myth of Thanksgiving, educators are seeking ways to help students appreciate colonial oppression of natives and the violence that ensued from it. The article helpfully includes a video of PBS NewsHour's Judy Woodruff explaining that the quintessential feel-good holiday of Thanksgiving actually perpetuates a myth and dishonors Native Americans. Well, Thanksgiving is a myth, but one can be true and a myth. One thing can be true and a myth at the same time. Our knowledge of the Pilgrims comes from two primary sources. The earliest account is from Edward Winslow, whose report on the founding of the Plymouth settlement was published in London in 1622, just 2 years after the Pilgrims arrived in the New World. The more detailed and authoritative account comes from the Pilgrims' second governor, William Bradford, whose poignant and eloquent history of Plymouth Plantation, written between 1630 and 1651, tells the story of the community from their formation in England to their exile in Holland and their eventual founding of the Plymouth colony. Any fair reading of the primary source documentation will give you all the evidence you need to understand why we chose the Pilgrims' arrival at Plymouth as the date of our true founding and as the basis of our founding myth. But before I examine that record, let me make it clear what I mean by founding myth. To call an event a founding myth is not to denigrate it or to question its historical accuracy. The fact that Americans don't understand this is an indictment of our education system, which no longer teaches the classics because learning Greek and Latin is apparently racist or something. Our nation's founders understood the concept of a founding or origin myth in the same way the ancient Greeks and Romans did. A nation's origin myth isn't a falsification of history meant to deceive. Quite the contrary, it's a story rooted in history that reflects a nation's most sacred values, rituals, and identity. To call something your founding myth is to state, this is who we were, this is who we are, and this is who we aspire to be. An origin myth often describes the emergence of a new civilization out of the ashes of an older one. Take, for example, the Aeneid, Virgil's epic poem recounting the founding myth of ancient Rome. In one of the most memorable passages, Virgil provided us with a perfect reflection of the Roman concept of pietas, which means a religious and familial duty. Virgil described his hero Aeneas fleeing the burning city of Troy while holding the hand of his young son and carrying on his back his elderly father, who is cradling in his arms their family's household gods. In that beautiful tableau, Aeneas reflects all the values the Romans held most sacred. He is protecting his family and honoring his gods as he flees the fall of one civilization and courageously sets out to found another, greater one, in Rome. And there is a lovely illustration here from the Galleria Borghese in Rome of Aeneas flees burning Troy by Federico Barocci. There is a reason why we chose the Pilgrims and their establishment of the Plymouth colony in 1620 as our origin myth, not the Virginians who settled in Jamestown over a decade before that date. Well, our reasoning had everything to do with the Pilgrims' lack of racism. Americans have always aspired to be on the right side of history, and the Pilgrims were nothing if not righteous. Their story embodies our most sacred American values, like Aeneas fleeing the fall of Troy. The Pilgrims saw themselves as fleeing a cataclysmic conflagration about to engulf Europe. And like the Roman hero, they too hoped to forge a new civilization with a spark from the dying embers of the old one. This is exactly how John Quincy Adams viewed the story of the Pilgrims. In a speech in 1802 commemorating the landing at Plymouth, Adams described the Pilgrims as America's origin myth, but unlike other nations, the heroes of our founding myth were clearly known to us by their historical record, and they were defined by their virtue, not by their conquest. Adams wrote, in reverting to the period of their origin, other nations have generally been compelled to plunge into the chaos of impenetrable antiquity, or to trace a lawless ancestry into the caverns of ravishers and robbers. It is your peculiar privilege to commemorate in this birthday of your nation an event ascertained in its minutest details an event of which the principal actors are known to you familiarly, as if belonging to your own age, an event of a magnitude before which imagination shrinks at the imperfection of her powers. It is your further happiness to behold in those eminent characters who are most conspicuous in accomplishing the settlement of your country, men upon whose virtue you can dwell with honest exultation. And Tim O'Brien has a piece in the American Mind called The Thanksgiving Table Throwdown. Sometime around October 11th of this year, which was Canada's Thanksgiving Day, someone in Canada posted a tweet that foretold what we Americans are in store for, well, today. An apparently unvaccinated woman tweeted that her mother decided to cancel the family's Thanksgiving dinner in light of the current pandemic. Fine, she thought, better luck next year. But then her mother asked her daughter to return a gravy boat to her, hopefully before October the 10th. Yes, her mother was having Thanksgiving, only she didn't invite her unvaccinated daughter, and the lie was transparent. How many American families are being torn apart, not by a virus, but by the calculatingly divisive nature of health policy propaganda, draconian administrative policies, and mass levels of conditioning? There's no way to know, of course. Still, the propaganda, the policies, and the conditioning wouldn't work if there wasn't a more basic human nature to exploit what is the natural divide between optimists and pessimists. Under normal circumstances, the differences are harmless and often meaningless. On a typical year, dinner table conversation may feature tales of young Katie's rock climbing adventures, while grandma cringes in fear at the very thought of taking such a risk. But this Thanksgiving's main course may center on a risk of a different sort. The decision to get together will be for some a risk not worth taking, but for others it's no big deal. It goes on from there. Who's vaccinated and who's not? Should they be invited or not? Who's had the virus and who has not? Should it matter? The battle lines are drawn, and it's not between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, though there will be some predictable overlap, but rather between the pessimists and the optimists. And, some good news. But first I'll ask the question, is America so short of native-born communists that it needs to import them from the former Soviet Union? This is from Kane at Citizen Free Press. 5 Democrat senators have told the White House they won't support Saul, or Solly, I don't know how it's pronounced, Omarova to head the office of the comptroller of the currency, effectively killing her nomination for the powerful bank regulator position. The defiant opposition from a broad coalition of senators reflects the real policy concerns they had with Omarova, a Cornell University law professor who attracted controversy for her Marxist academic writings. Their opposition also hints at a willingness of some Democrat senators to buck the White House on an important nomination, even if it hands Republicans a political and symbolic victory. Yes, this person had said that, yes, oil and gas companies are going to go bankrupt because of, the Great Reset, and that's a good thing because who needs heat? Heat comes from the sun. Is that the position that we're heading towards now? That artificial warmth is the creation of the devil? Perhaps we're getting there. Perhaps we're getting there. And we have a typically excellent essay from Mary Harrington at Unheard. That's unherd.com, called Why Anarchy Has Come to America. As Britain is only a distant province of America's soft power empire, it's been relatively easy to turn the volume down on Kyle Rittenhouse discourse. Even so, it's been unsettling to watch the same events assembled into 2 irreconcilable stories. In one, a white supremacist shot anti-racism protesters in cold blood and was acquitted because of his skin color. In the other, a teenager tried to defend a community from violence and ended up shooting 2 criminal lunatics in self-defense. But why are these stories so irreconcilable? It's a good rule of thumb that where people find it impossible to agree, it's usually because there's a fundamental difference in their assumptions about the world. The Rittenhouse argument is just such a case. It's powered by a profound disagreement about human nature, one that fuels many of the most intractable modern culture wars, from Mumsnet bun fights about baby care to arguments about classroom discipline and what the police force is for. Are humans naturally good given the right circumstances, or are we flawed and in need of threats and guidelines to keep us on the straight and narrow? The split is a legacy of radical ideas stretching back to the revolutionary 18th century. Perhaps the most famous proponent of intrinsic human goodness is Rousseau, who claimed in Emile, 1762, that children are born virtuous. As Rousseau sees it, we only need freedom, love, and the right environment to spontaneously come to an understanding of what's right. When Emile was first published, it stood in stark challenge to the then dominant view, emerging from the Christian tradition, that humans are tainted by original sin. From this vantage point, we're naturally flawed and must always struggle against our less virtuous instincts. Rousseau's claim so appalled adherents of this then dominant view that copies of his book were burned in the street. Today, though, the boot is on the other foot. The high status view among contemporary elites is unmistakably Team Rousseau. At the tiniest scale, it's expressed in the school of parenting that believes it's wrong or even cruel to teach children how to live. I've written before about the currently popular ideas of attachment parenting and gentle parenting, which emphasize self-discovery in a loving environment over routine, authority, or punishment, and about how these views skew wealthy and liberal. In education settings, the same idea appears as child-centered pedagogy, an approach that emphasizes individual pathways and discovery over rote learning and teachers as authority figures. And at the biggest scale, it crops up as the claim that all the root causes of crime are external to humans: poverty, trauma, discrimination, and so on. From this perspective, if we could only replace policing with tailored community services that eliminated these root causes, there would no longer be any crime. Even outbreaks of mass public disorder are treated by Team Rousseau as an unfortunate yet understandable response to bad governance. When BLM protesters in Baltimore toppled a statue of Christopher Columbus last year, the Democrat politician Nancy Pelosi responded by shrugging it off as a natural expression of that community's wishes. If the community doesn't want the statue, she said, the statue shouldn't be there. From this vantage point, public unrest is something akin to the weather, a naturally occurring phenomenon in which leaders must strive to create the conditions for goodness, or else people will do what they do. If angry 18th century moralists burned Rousseau's book on education, today the moral majority is more likely to dogpile people who disagree with the belief that we're all born good. Catherine Birbal-Singh, head teacher of Britain's strictest school, Michaela Community School in London, recently faced demands that she be fired after she referenced original sin in the context of teaching. From the Team Original Sin perspective, as Michaela's deputy head, Jonathan Porter, argued last year, providing empathy and interesting lessons won't guarantee you good classroom behavior. To Porter, children aren't so much naturally good as capable of being habituated to the good. But that, he suggests, means making clear statements about what you believe to be good, setting rules on that basis, and enforcing them consistently. This might be doable within a single school with a strong leader such as Michaela. What happens, though, when a sizable proportion of the ruling class think this approach is not just misguided, but immoral? Last summer, rioting broke out, first in America and then worldwide, prompting U.S. Senator Tom Cotton to write an op-ed arguing that order was important in and of itself and suggesting the army be deployed to quell the riots. The ensuing shouting match between Team Original Sin and Team Rousseau ended the career of the New York Times comment editor. Implicitly, then, for Team Rousseau, disorder is understandable when people are oppressed, while order is a nice to have and only attainable if you create the right conditions to draw people's natural goodness. In schools, we can only expect pupils to behave if the teacher's doing it right. And in the public square, we can only expect people not to riot if we abolish systemic oppression. Applying this model to policing means diverting resources from enforcing order to addressing social issues. San Francisco, for example, voted last year to redirect $120 million of funding from policing to community projects, with the aim of eliminating the causes of crime rather than simply punishing criminals. But there's always the nagging worry. What do you do with people who persistently refuse to have their natural goodness drawn out? And here perhaps we find a clue as to why Team Rousseau tends to skew wealthy. It's easier to believe people are naturally good if you've led a sheltered life. Mary Harrington continues, as a child, Rousseau himself wasn't allowed to play with other children. And it's conceivable that more daily rough and tumble with his peers might have tempered the rosy view of natural childish virtue presented in a meal. When people who have led shelters' lives apply Team Rousseau beliefs in less rarefied settings, the result isn't always as salutary as hoped. Even innocent experiments in self-discovery can impact negatively on others, especially where the experiment, innocent or otherwise, is in how far you can push one of your classmates. Well, I think anyone who has ever had children or can remember what it was like to have been a child will know that children are monsters, monsters of narcissism, egotism, cruelty, and even sadism. Not always, but certainly frequently enough. I remember years ago taking one of my daughters to the Lonsdale Quay at the foot of North Vancouver. And they have a public market there, and some things for kids, like one of the big rooms where it's all just plastic balls and you sort of float around in the plastic balls. Well, my daughter, who I guess was about 7 years old, was in this, and there was a boy several years older, and he started chucking these plastic balls as hard as he could at her head, hitting her over and over again, such that she started crying and then, wailing or screaming in terror. And I looked around for this boy's mother, nowhere to be found. There was no way that I could get in there to stop this from happening. And I shook my fist or whatever, shouted at this boy, and he just laughed at me. I wanted to strangle him. This is what they call motiveless malignity. And this is something that children display very often indeed. Again, people are naturally good, Team Rousseau says. Have you met people? Is my response. Again, this is an essay by Mary Harrington, Why Anarchy Has Come to America, at unheard.com. And, oh, yes, let's weaponize passive language, shall we? Something bad happened in Wisconsin. How about we just leave it at that? Okay. Yeah, but what about Dylan Roof? He shot all those nice black church ladies. Well, that's different. Well, how is it different? Because he's white. That's what it comes down to. This is Matt Margolis at PJ Media. The Waukesha massacre doesn't fit the narrative the mainstream media typically likes to promote, so they've been generally trying to ignore it. If certain details were different, the story would be getting endless coverage and analysis, but even when the MSN does cover it somehow, they manage to beclown themselves. Case in point, the Washington Post. The Jeff Bezos-owned publication published an in-depth analysis of how the massacre unfolded, declaring, quote, "Here's what we know so far on the sequence of events that led to the Waukesha tragedy caused by an SUV," unquote. Caused by an SUV? Really? An SUV caused the tragedy? Who wrote that line? I'm not kidding either. This is not a joke or a hoax. Here's the tweet, which not only shows the ridiculous line in the text of the tweet, but was in the metadata of the article itself. Based on the tweet, you might conclude that the SUV was a self-driving car that had achieved sentience and went on a rampage. The article doesn't do much better. The suspect isn't even mentioned by name until several paragraphs in. Frankly, I'm amazed they acknowledge there was a human driver at all. And we have this from CNN. which purged all stories about the massacre from the front page of its website yesterday. And here's a story from CNN by 5 different writers. A sixth victim has died after the Waukesha Christmas parade crash, prosecutors say. Christmas parade crash. Yes. Yeah, they're really shameless. Absolutely shameless. And oh, yes, let's have some news from Canada. The leader of the Green Party, a strange black woman from the Caribbean who shaved her head, was also an Orthodox Jew, which is it's strange that she became leader because the Green Party is notoriously, ferociously anti-Zionist and, well, I'd say to a large extent, simply anti-Jew. But so this woman got into a controversy about Palestine that she had after the latest outbreak of war. The leader had tweeted that we need to have peace, right? This woman's name was Annemie Paul. Yes, peace. Then she was attacked by one of the Green Party MPs as not being sufficiently pro-Palestinian. And then a spokesperson for her, the leader at that time, Annemie Paul, who was a Jew, attacked the MP, saying that the Green Party must be pro-Israel. And this ended with just the collapse of the Green Party. Of course, Annemie Paul was not elected, and the Green Party lost seats, and its vote was cut in half. So now we have an interim leader. Okay. This is from Global News and Eric Stober. So I suppose, the Green Party might be thinking, we got this reputation as being a cabal of weirdos. What can we do to fix that perception? Well, the Green Party has named Dr. Amita Kuttner as interim leader. They, yes, not she, but they, are the youngest and first transgender and East Asian person to ever lead a national party, according to the Greens. No, you have to go to the Greens for that. I think that if Canada had a national party with a transgender leader, I think everyone would know that. The 30-year-old is an astrophysicist with expertise in black holes and is the founder of the Moonlight Institute, a nonprofit that explores responses to climate change. Nothing weird about that at all. And if you look at the Wikipedia entry for this person, you will find that Kuttner is non-binary and pansexual and uses they, them, and he, him pronouns. Both? How does that work? Kuttner was born in North Vancouver. Kuttner's mother taught computer science at Capilano University and was an immigrant from Hong Kong. Kuttner's father immigrated to Canada from the United Kingdom. In 2005, Kuttner's mother was killed in a natural disaster when a mudslide crashed down Mount Seymour into they family's town. That's what it says. Their father survived but suffered serious injuries and later sued the district for neglecting safety programs around mudslides. Yes, I'm well familiar with North Vancouver and the two sides of Mount Seymour. And there's a side that you want to live on, and there's a side that you don't want to live on because it is prone to ferocious mudslides. But people have built houses there for some reason, but no, there's not enough education apparently about the possible consequences of living on the wrong side of a mountain in the rainforest. And so Kuttner ran for the leadership of the Green Party, but this person doesn't seem to be very happy. During the campaign, Kuttner refused to hold fundraising events with former leader Elizabeth May, saying the offer of assistance with fundraising does not address other systemic inequities in the race. Kuttner finished in sixth place, being eliminated in the fourth round with 7.3% of the vote. This person told the Toronto Star that they had submitted an official complaint to the party's federal court about transphobia and racism that was experienced during the race, such as facing slurs during online party events. Yes, the Green Party is so racist that they elected a black leader. But you must have noticed this. I just see it almost every day, that these organizations, which are supposed to be the wokest on earth, always face a crisis or collapse with accusations of racism, sexism, misogyny, transphobia, homophobia, and the like. It's just, it always happens. But I wish the Green Party well. No, I don't. I don't. Someone corrected me on this. It was hyperbolic. But I've been saying for years that no one who has ever worked for a living has ever voted for the Green Party. Let's talk about Seth Rogen. Yes, I know. This is from Angelo Isidoro at the Post Millennial. Comedian Seth Rogen, I thought that he was a dope salesman, faced a wave of ridicule Wednesday after urging residents to normalize crimes in big cities such as Los Angeles. The statement came as a reply to content creator Casey Neistat, who tweeted that his cars got robbed this morning because Los Angeles is a crime-riddled third world shithole of a city with tremendous appreciation and gratitude to the hardworking officers at LAPD West LA who not only arrested the, I won't say that word, but they got all of our stolen goods back. Seth Rogen replied to Neistat saying, "Dude, I've lived here for over 20 years. You're nuts, haha. It's lovely here. Don't leave anything valuable in it. It's called living in a big city." Neistat replied, "I can still be mad though, right? Feel so violated." Rogen continued, suggesting Neistat not only get used to crime, but open himself up to the possibility of receiving items the criminal may leave behind. "You may be mad, but I don't personally view my car as an extension of myself. And I've never really felt violated any of the 15 or so times my car was broken into. Once a guy accidentally left a cool knife in my car. So if it keeps happening, you might get a little treat." "I didn't get any treats," Neistat replied. "He just took the decorations from my daughter's 7th birthday party and left bloody handprints." Serious question. How did you get your car broken into 15 times? "I lived in West Hollywood for 20 years and parked on the street," Rogen replied. "Also, it sucks your shit was stolen, but LA is not some shithole city. As far as big cities go, it's got a lot going for it." Joel Petland responded, "Defending the quality of life in your city by referencing the 15 times your car was broken into and the possibility that you may get a free weapon left by a criminal is not the defense you think it is." Following publication of these tweets, Rogen went viral on social media, with many pointing out the absurdity of his perception of crime. Jacob Airy responded, "Seth Rogen, who will throw his co-stars and friends under a bus for money, lives in a gated community, gets free security, and is pampered for a living. He would never set foot in a section of LA where the peasants would go." In addition to the backlash, Rogen seemingly doubled down and began direct messaging multiple Twitter users with profanity. Let's see, Amanda Milius, the daughter of John Milius, the director and one of my favorites, and the caper of the family flame, said, "That's not something to do because I'm not a 5'9" manlet with a BMI of 32. Does it hurt?" This is after he had sent her a direct message. "Hi, go F yourself. Happy Thanksgiving." He then tweeted, "A lot of people come at me and talk shit on Twitter, hoping I'll engage with them publicly and give them attention, but instead I DM them and tell them to go F themselves privately. It's a lot more fun." Amanda Milius responded, "Nope, it's more fun in public." Oh, and Angela Isidoro tweeted the author of this piece, my official statement on Seth Rogen telling me to get effed. Crime is a bad thing for those of us who don't live in gated communities. Also, Sausage Party was awful. I have not seen Sausage Party. I've seen clips from it. And I thought, how did this movie ever get made? How did it ever get made? And who looks at food and imagines various types of food having sexual congress with each other? Who imagines that? Well, I guess stoners like Seth Rogen do. Let's go to the chat. Respectable commenting name says, how does one go from being a dude weed, LMAO, to dude corporate approved progressive leftism, LMAO? It's not like I expect much out of them, but what a joke. I'll say it again. If Amanda's a chip off the old block, I have to wonder if the Coens' homage to him in Lebowski was subdued compared to the real thing. Morris 182, hello there. Says Sausage Party seemed just as bad as Big Mouth on Netflix mixed with torture porn. Brandon Smith says most people can't stare deeply at themselves in a mirror for more than a few moments. That comes out in the way they treat others. I once read this novel by Ralph Toledano, who was another longtime contributor to National Review and who was a star in journalism, right-wing journalism, before National Review was founded. He was journalistically integral to the Whittaker Chambers Alger Hiss case. And of course, Buckley typically wrote snotty obituary about him. But in this novel, de Toledano, who was a Catholic convert, he describes staring into a mirror and then getting the experience that the mirror is staring back into you. And I thought, that's interesting. So I went into the bathroom and started staring at the mirror, and about 10 seconds later, I turned away and said to myself, I'm not doing this anymore. Okay, what are we talking about here from Anne Run? I'd recommend it. Kingsley is very good, but I prefer Ian McShane's performance. Ray Winston, the lead, is also very good. The chick flick angle is Winston's deep love for his wife. Oh, we're talking about Sexy Beast. Yeah. Ray Winston is very good. Everyone is very good in that. It's a scabrous but wonderful movie, or so it seemed to me, by one of my very favorite directors, Jonathan Glazer, whose second film was torpedoed by a phony public scandal. And then his third movie, Under the Skin, I thought it was absolutely tremendous. I suppose it's not the sort of movie that's going to make much money these days. But Jonathan Glazer has another career making ads. And and music videos. Let's see. Karma Coma, Massive Attack, Street Spirit by Radiohead, Virtual Insanity by Jamiroquai, Karma Police by Radiohead, Rabbit in Your Headlights by Uncle, up in the top 5 of videos that I love. And he's made a lot of commercials, some brilliant ones for Stella Artois, 2 of them featuring priests for some reason. A frozen pond with all of these old-timey priests skating on it. And one of the priests decides that he wants beer. So a novice is sent out to buy a case of Stella Artois, a wooden case, old-timey, and the ice is thin, and the priest is submerged in the freezing water, and then you can see the bottles bouncing up against the ice, and the priest is instructed to dive back into the water to retrieve the Stella Artois. He made a very famous award-winning ad for Levi Strauss called Odyssey. It's really thrilling to watch. Oh, let's see. Brandon Smith says the older you get, the dimmer the light of human nature shines. Seth Rogen, says Dan. Yes, exactly. Okay, what else do we got here? Okay. It's a sort of remake of Point Blank, which Kevin might have reviewed. I've reviewed so many of these movies now that I can't remember whether I have in fact reviewed Point Blank, which stars John Berman. It stars Lee Marvin, and it is directed by John Borman. And it's a really strange gangster movie that Lee Marvin has been ripped off, and he just wants to be made whole, and he's prepared to turn the entire underworld upside down to get what he deserves. It's really good. It's got tons of great character actors in it. Keenan Wynn, Carol O'Connor, Lloyd Bachner, John Vernon is especially memorable. It's got Angie Dickinson and the lovely Sharon Acker in it. James Sicking in an early role. No, I love Point Blank, a movie which has been, shall we say, much imitated by the likes of Quentin Tarantino. And hello to Chad Chadson, our valiant moderator. Thank you for your service. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. He says, I have over 20 family members over, and only 3 of them have COVID. Hauper says, Lee Marvin is like a human Terminator in the film. Anran says, I don't remember if he did that. I would definitely watch Point Blank. I'd also recommend The Hit with Terrence Stamp, John Hurt, and Tim Roth. And let's move on. Some news from Britain, from Jack Maidment at the Mail. Ex-Home Secretary Lord Blunkett says Nigel Farage could become Prime Minister if UK sets up safe routes for asylum seekers under Labour. Yes, because of course the whole world should come to Britain, which is a tiny island, a relatively tiny island, in the North Atlantic. Because what could possibly go wrong? What has possibly gone wrong with immigration in Britain, since it started in big numbers from the Third World in the 1950s? Oh, yeah, grooming scandals in 20 or more English cities, but those young girls, they don't understand the virtues of diversity. And it's typically difficult in a parliamentary system to get rid of leaders, but boy, the Labour Party, and particularly the Conservative Party in Britain, they've just been throwing them off to the side. They're all getting the hook. And maybe the hook is coming from Boris Johnson. David Wilcock writes in the Mail, Boris Johnson faced senior Tory backbenchers at number 10 today, amid claims he is losing his grip on the party in the wake of weeks of political battering. The 17-strong executive of the 1922 committee had talks with the Prime Minister this afternoon amid an alarming slump in his popularity with voters. Johnson is struggling to escape the quicksand of ongoing crises over Tory sleaze, social care costs, and migrants dying in the English Channel. The Premier suffered another blow as a Savanta Comres poll last night suggested the chaos is cutting through to voters, with his net favorability score dropping to -14, its lowest ever. Reports suggest as many as a dozen letters of no confidence in Johnson's leadership have been submitted to him, far short of the 54 required under party rules to trigger a vote on his leadership. It comes as Chancellor Rishi Sunak was given a top accolade by the Conservative Party's Bible. He was named a Politician of the Year by the Spectator magazine, which the Prime Minister once edited. And this is a distressing topic, but here's the good news at the top. This is by James Anthony at the Post Millennial. Dr. Alan Walker, who was a controversial professor at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia, has now voluntarily resigned after a scandal developed around a book he wrote in which he referred to pedophiles as minor attracted persons. Walker had previously been placed on leave by the university after the release of the book, which calls for a new paradigm for society addressing pedophiles. The university and Walker issued a joint statement on the university's website saying, "Today, Old Dominion University and Dr. Alan Walker are announcing that Dr. Walker has decided to step down from their position as assistant professor of sociology and criminal justice at the expiration of their current contract in May 2022. Dr. Walker will remain on leave until that time." Walker's book, titled Long Dark Shadow: Minor Attracted People and Their Pursuit of Dignity, further advocates for sex dolls resembling children, suggesting that this could keep minor attracted persons, or MAPs as they call them, from acting their fantasies out on real children. A lot of people, when they hear the word pedophile, they automatically assume that means sex offender. That isn't true, and it leads to a lot of misconceptions, wrote Walker in the book. More than 15,000 people signed a petition, which was started online, demanding the university get rid of Walker in the wake of the book's launch. And we have an essay here from a famous Somali woman who fled the country, Ayan Hirsi Ali. This is also on Unheard, called "Pedophilia is Not Progressive. Social justice campaigns have given up on morality." Again, your slippery slope argument. I've been saying for decades, every slippery slope argument turns out to be correct. And I don't really like to talk about slippery slope arguments because, yes, if this horrible, disgusting thing is allowed, then something even more horrible or disgusting will come in its wake. Now, that happens to be true, but in effect, it is conceding defeat on the imposition or normalization of something horrible and disgusting. For instance, after during the gay marriage controversy, if we get gay marriage, then all these other people will demand marriage rights as well. Polygamists, brothers and sisters, whatever. Yeah, that is happening. But the fact is that to talk about it at the time, as was done, is essentially, or in essence, surrendering. Well, I guess we've got to put up with this now. Ali begins now that safe spaces and universal acceptance have become the norm. It is fashionable to tolerate all kinds of proclivities and inclinations in the name of diversity. But until recently, we respected the nebulous line that faintly dissects the parameters of what we consider to be good and evil. Not so today, where there is a growing campaign to destigmatize everything, even if doing so requires us to unpick the moral fabric of our society. How else are we to explain the two most disturbing causes trumpeted by modern progressives of pedophilia and of polygamy? To some extent, they can't be compared. Polygamy remains legal in a number of countries, from South Africa and Malaysia to Iran and Morocco. Pedophilia, on the other hand, has long been considered beyond the pale and is effectively banned across the world. Most countries have an age of consent, and those that don't, such as Sudan and Afghanistan, require a couple to be married before sex is legally allowed. Well, this would be sex between men and women. We all know about the Bachi-Bazi boys in Afghanistan. And yet, in America, of all places, activists are now campaigning for the destigmatization of pedophilic desires. To remain horrified is bigoted. We need to feel empathy for the suffering that pedophiles face. What makes this movement even more disturbing is that its advocates are not confined to some progressive fringe. Even those whose jobs it is to end child sexual abuse now support it. Only last week, Elizabeth Letourneau, director of the Moore Center for the Prevention of Child Sex Abuse at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, tweeted, "Many adults with sexual attraction to children want help to control it, hate the feeling, don't want to act on it. Helping them prevents child sexual abuse. Stigmatizing the conversation puts kids at risk." She was responding to the debate sparked at Old Dominion University, which I've already talked about. Walker, that's a Dr. Alan Walker, spelled Allyn, whose preferred pronouns are they, them, is concerned for the well-being of MAPS, the new preferred term for individuals attracted to children. When asked about the use of MAPS in a recent interview, Walker responded, "I think it's important to use terminology for groups that members of that group want others to use for them. It is less stigmatizing than other words like pedophile. In other words, let's not hurt the pedophile's feelings." Well, as the doctor on The Simpsons once said, yes, I know that hillbillies want to be called sons of the soil, but that ain't going to happen. But back to Ali. Throughout the interview, Walker deploys terms taken straight from the social justice playbook, as if pedophilia were just another sexual preference in need of its own pride. Activists talk of lowering stigma of a minority that is at risk and universally maligned. As far back as 2017, in a PhD thesis titled Understanding Resilience Strategies Among Minor Attracted Individuals, Walker notes how child pornography as a harm reduction technique has previously been theorized to be a potential strategy for MAPS to maintain abstinence from sexual contact with children. Ali says, "I am a firm defender of academic freedom, and I believe the problem of pedophilia needs to be studied. But that does not mean that we can ignore the danger destigmatizing pedophilia poses to children. We should not be normalizing the idea that it's tolerable to fantasize about sex with children. A university and a university press should not be pushing this kind of harmful material. And yet this dangerous tendency to tolerate every and any proclivity, no matter how wicked, has become widespread, along with pedophilia, polygamy, a practice which should have ended centuries ago, is making a comeback as an acceptable form of relationship. Last year, Utah enacted Senate Bill 102, which lowers the penalty for polygamy from a felony to an offense on par with a traffic summons, as long as the new spouse consents to the marriage. In other words, Utah has legalized polygamy. Even pop culture is embracing the trend. Just this week, millennial influencer Lauren Bostic posted her thoughts on polygamy to her 1 million Instagram followers. Quote, "I am into freedom of choice. I don't waste my energy worried about what people's relationship choices are. Everyone's different. If not hurting anyone and it works for you, go for it." Yeah. I like to use this word, unsustainable. And that is where we are now. Definitely unsustainable. I've seen a new Lego commercial, and this is sort of slipped in at the beginning. It's a sign that says Romeo and Juliet. No, not Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Julio. So even Lego is gay now. Here's a story. Let's see. Which one am I going to use? I'll use this one here. This is a story from a Breitbart by Chris Tomlinson. The Norwegian Postal Service Posten has released an annual Christmas video featuring Santa Claus falling in love with another man to mark the 50th anniversary of Norway's decriminalization of homosexuality. The video, entitled When Harry Met Santa, is a 4-minute short film in which the main character interacts with Santa Claus several times before writing him a letter stating, "Dear Santa, all I want for Christmas is you." Yeah. Lego, Santa Claus. Blue's Clues? I could go on and on and on. Let's go for the children. Let's go for the children. That's what this is all about. The video ends stating that in 2022, Norway will mark the 50th anniversary of, quote, "being able to love whoever we want," unquote. This is important, okay? Love is love, and other similar statements are universal injunctions. If they wanted to say gay is good, they could have said gay is good, but no, they're saying love is love. Universal. So it's no surprise that polygamy and pedophilia are being normalized because, remember, love is love. And there is a piece in The Guardian by Daniel Koku Let's talk about sex, how Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion's WAP sent the world into overdrive. Did it now? A cultural cancer, soft porn, or the height of empowerment? A revealing documentary examines the debates around one of the raunchiest and most talked about rap records around. As winter forces many of us to ditch nights out with friends in favor of nights in on the sofa, Belcalis Alamanzar's iconic words ring out across the digital ether: a hoe never gets cold. That's inspirational, aspirational, is it? Or inspirational? Or both? Is it empowering for a woman to describe herself as a hoe? And yes, so this is typical bait and switch here. Oh, yes, from fellatio to makeup sex, Cardi and Megan leave their targets weak. Oh, do they now? With the video quickly becoming a talking point around the world, their sexual desire and that of women in general became the subject of fierce debate. While many praised their cheeky candor, others were unimpressed with Fox News' Candace Owens going so far as to call Cardi a cancer cell who was destroying a culture. For the director and producer Poppy Begum, the idea to make a documentary about WAP fever was fueled by those extreme and polarized reactions. I wasn't expecting the morality police to have their knickers in such a twist over the song, says Begum. I don't believe you. I think you are lying. She began thinking about the double standard that exists between male and female rappers. The moment a woman makes a song like this, the scrutiny and speculation goes through the roof. It gets so boring after a while. Meg and Cardi's loud, empowering exclamations made an impact, but they're not the first. Women and female rappers in particular have always talked about sex. Together, they are following in the footsteps of artists including Lil' Kim, Trina, Missy Elliott, and Kia, who is responsible for the iconic Zero's anthem, My Neck, My Back. And yet, such frank discussion still brings out a combination of wonder and disgust in many people. So, as I say, typical bait and switch. This is just so empowering. The whole world is, talking about it. And then at the end, we find out that America apparently is incredibly repressed sexually. And women, particularly Black women, are they're oppressed more than anyone. They don't look oppressed. They don't act oppressed. The oppression is just taken as a given. And, okay. Okay. Uh-oh. You remember the Delta variant? Well, now there's something even scarier. Our scientists are deeply concerned. Sajid Javid sounds alarm over new worst ever super mutant COVID variant that will make vaccines at least 40% less effective as flights are banned from South Africa and 5 other African countries. UK Health Security Agency says B.1.1.529 has more than 30 mutations, most ever recorded in a variant. They should come up with a catchier name for that. Yeah. So we're getting these new, we get the vaccine, and then we get these variants, each one seemingly deadlier than the last. I wonder why that is happening. Again, I'm putting my money down on miasma. That must be the cause. Let's see. This is Kane at Citizen Free Press. Aussie MP goes viral. Time for free citizens to break the law. This is George Christensen, MP from Queensland. And so we get the vaccine, and that means we won't need to mask and socially distance anymore. But apparently we do. And the people who get the vaccine won't get COVID-19. Well, they do. So the unvaccinated need to get vaccinated in order to protect the vaccinated. Okay. But if you're vaccinated, then you get government permission to have a normal life and to travel. Not so fast, buddy. This is from Sylvia Amaro at CNBC. The European Union is considering a 9-month expiration date on its COVID-19 vaccine certificates, which allow tourists certain freedoms to travel while the coronavirus pandemic still rages. The idea now is that the document has a lifespan of 9 months after the first set of vaccines are administered. So after the second dose for Pfizer-BioNTech shot, for example, or after one dose of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the idea is that immunity wanes, then a vaccine passport will expire. Thursday's recommendation does not yet address booster shots. Oh, it will. It will. Yeah, so it's a conspiracy theory to talk about the waning efficacy of vaccines, and they just sort of slipped that in there now. This has happened a few weeks ago. Oh yeah, the CDC saying, hey, it doesn't matter whether 100% of the population is vaccinated. That's not going to stop COVID transmission. Whoa, slow down. How come this isn't the number one story in the world? Well, I guess to ask the question is to answer it. And we have a study here from the American Heart Association. Abstract 10712, mRNA COVID vaccines dramatically increase endothelial inflammatory markers and ACS risk as measured by the PULS cardiac test, a warning. Yeah, you remember that conspiracy theory? Remember that one? And this is from Steve Watson at Summit News. After another professional football player collapsed on the pitch and was rushed to hospital in England this week, one former pro who was commenting on the incident questioned whether the player had been recently vaccinated, prompting the live feed to be suddenly cut. Again, must be my asthma. A story from, nurses, hospital officials. This is again Steve Watson. Treatment of kids injured in Waukesha car attack being hampered by vaccine mandate. And this is from the Wall Street Journal. And I don't know, the word chutzpah comes to mind. This is by Valerie Bauerlein. School districts nationwide are canceling classes for what they are calling mental health days, saying students and staff need the breaks to handle the pressure of returning to school during the COVID-19 pandemic. It is another way this era for K-12 education is unlike any other. I'm reading this exactly as it is printed. Don't blame me. As educators rush to make up for lost instructional time while simultaneously managing last-minute closures for quarantine, a lack of bus and cafeteria staff, and now the need to take a break from stress. Oh, didn't they have like a 12-month, 18-month break from teaching in person, and that's not enough? The practice caught on in early November when many districts in the Southeast opted to create a long weekend by canceling school on November the 12th, the Friday after Veterans Day, according to Burbio, a Pelham, New York data company that is monitoring K-12 school closures in 5,000 districts across the country. The announcement of closures accelerated in the middle of the month as many school districts decided to cancel classes the entire week of Thanksgiving, said Dennis Roche, Burbio president. The volume was really high really quickly, he said. The pain. The latest numbers from the province of Ontario, population 14.8 million, Canada's most populous province. This is from Cody Wilson at CP24. 750 new infections reported in Ontario. And of the cases confirmed today, 356 are on unvaccinated individuals, 19 in partially vaccinated people, 329 are in those who are fully vaccinated, and 44 involve people with an unknown vaccination status. But, the important thing is that unvaccinated individuals account for 48% of all cases, despite representing only about 20% of the population. That's the big takeaway. This is from Kane at Citizen Free Press. Canada hospital denies surgery to 7-year-old boy over medical mask exemption. Severely fractured humerus. Several hospitals said no. The kitty is not wearing a mask. No, we're not going to do this surgery. Let's go to a certain Substack written by a man with the initials AB. This one's short and sweet. This is Sky News reported. The World Health Organization says it's time for countries to have healthy debate about mandatory vaccination. AB responds, I say it's time to discuss mostly peaceful protests. And happy Thanksgiving from the home of the Bill of Rights. And we'll have a quick look here at Lockdown Skeptics or dailyskeptic.org, as it's now called, the return of the flu. The flu has returned to some countries with high rates of natural immunity against COVID. In contrast, countries with high vaccination rates are seeing record new COVID waves, reports Swiss Policy Research. COVID in Scotland, huge drop in hospital admissions for older people, 80%. UK policing bill, disease is added as a public nuisance offense. The government's policing bill creates a new public nuisance offense. The offense includes where an individual risks causing another person to suffer disease. Oh, unlike AIDS or HIV, you remember the outrage when, it's just outrageous that people who don't tell their sexual partners that they're HIV positive infect them. That is homophobic. French Caribbean mocked by fresh unrest over COVID measures. Wave of excess deaths not explained by COVID. The UK is suffering a wave of excess deaths not fully explained by COVID, according to official statistics, reports the London Times. The COVID revolts Europe's new wave of unrest. We are indeed the odd one out in Europe, but not necessarily in a bad way, writes Ross Clark in The Spectator. The decline of the humble Christmas card in a world striving for equality is far easier to bring us all down to the lowest level than raise us higher, says Frederick Edwards, who comments on a new generation of woke Christmas cards loaded with foul language in Bournebrook magazine. Why would anyone do that? Why would anyone do that? Well, I know, because they want to be obnoxious. And apparently, there's no escape. I think that's the message. There are many metrics by which to measure society's growing coarseness. One perhaps overlooked yardstick is the humble card shop. Walking through London the other day, I realized I hadn't got any Christmas cards yet. Knowing that most years I leave it until December 23rd to start sorting things out, I decided to be proactive. I don't consider myself overly puritanical, but I suffered a bit of a sense of humor failure when I started browsing the shelves. My eyes glanced across the Christmas section. Merry Xmas, all I want for you is, and I'm not going to repeat that word, Mary, and I'm not going to repeat that other as well. A theme was developing. Some cards were more elaborate setups of the same punchline, with the season's greetings delivered alongside insult. Dozens of them adorned the shelves, offering every conceivable combination of various swear words combined with Christmas. Merry Christmas, you fugly slut, stated another. Oh my God. Oh my God. And I'm going to go to Theater Thursday very shortly, and I have to open some tabs here. But before I go to Theater Thursday, I will go back to the chat, and we are almost there. The reason that for this delay is simply that if I have too many tabs open, it sometimes leads to buffering, and I don't want that. So I open the tabs. Typically, I have anywhere from 50 to 70 links, in a Microsoft Word doc. and then I open them, and then I close them, and I open some more. So there's an explanation of that. Let's go back to the chat. And has Kevin forgotten Tainter? I was wondering when someone was going to ask that. I'll tell you what happened. I'll make a promise to you. I will go back to Tainter tomorrow. Every so often, I get an update, Microsoft update, say, and so my computer has to reboot. And so the document that has Tainter's book, The Collapse of Complex Societies, well, it gets closed. So I have to open it, but it's not going to open at the place where I left it. And so I had found that since a lot of the language in this book is, repeated, terms repeated, various empires repeated, whatever, I found that I'd lost my place. And then I found that it was going to take some work to find out. When is book club? Book club, asked Teresa Goldstein. That's tomorrow. Don Cherry did nothing wrong, says Don Willis. Linda Lavin was semi-hot. No, she was not. Oh, dear. Anwar says, I recall a Christmas card from the movie version of Less Than Zero. Something like, let's, yeah, okay. Yeah, I remember that too. Underrated movie, I must say. Great performances from Robert Downey Jr. and Nicholas Pryor. It is, it's really grim. Really, really grim. How many are actually vaccinated? Asked John Vance. I'll leave it at that. COVID-22 coming up, lol, says Dave Boreas. COVID-19 is extinct, says same source. We just got done with our Turkey super spreader event, says Don Willis, waiting for the authorities to kick down our door. We have leftovers for guests. Okay. No, it's not my asthma. It's an imbalance in the humors, says Emmett Kelly's Earth. Okay. Not marketable. The long one, perhaps B25. Okay. I'll add it to my watch list. A long list, says Anren. KMG, black women's are exhausted, said Ogan's Iron. It's not just black women, just leftist women generally. They all claim to be exhausted. Exhausted. KMG, mass sexual education starting in kindergarten, has one goal. 4 years from now, they'll say 87% of 10-year-olds have had 4 years of sex ed. Now this means they're ready to consent. Yeah, well, that could happen. That could happen. But let's talk about something happier here. Our movie today is from 1957, and it is called An Affair to Remember. And it is directed by Leo McCarey, and the screenplay is by Delmer Davis and Donald Ogden Stewart, with assistance by Leo McCarey. Now, this film is a remake, a very close remake of McCarey's 1939 film, Love Affair, which starred Irene Dunne and Charles Boyer. It seems that Cary Grant had been asked to star in the original film, and he turned it down and later regretted it. So he went to Leo McCarey and said, how about we do a remake of An Affair to Remember? Now, why would you want to make a remake? Well, okay, various reasons. I suppose color and screen. This is a widescreen, very widescreen film. It is filmed in gorgeous CinemaScope with deluxe color, and the original is the Academy ratio black and white. I suppose Cary Grant, one of the biggest movie stars in the world, was available. And actually, I should mention that the original Love Affair is available at you can get it from the Criterion Collection, and I believe it is being released in Britain by Indicator, which makes fine Blu-rays. So Leo McCarey was one of the giants. He was born in 1898, died in 1969. One of the giants of, world cinema. He put Laurel and Hardy together. He started working started in Hollywood with great horror director Todd Browning. And he worked with silent stars, and he worked with Gloria Swanson and Eddie Cantor, and he made what many people consider to be the best Marx Brothers movie, Duck Soup. He also worked with W.C. Fields and Mae West. Now, in 1937, McCary made a film called Make Way for Tomorrow, which I have reviewed on Theater Thursday, the old one. A film that Orson Welles said would make a stone cry. Make Way for Tomorrow is, you could say that it's brutal realism. And for 1937, it is absolutely shocking. Absolutely shocking. And this film that I'm going to talk about today, An Affair to Remember, is a unashamed weepy, but not in the way that Make Way for Tomorrow is. It is a grossly manipulative film with a plot that is absolutely preposterous. But I love it. I absolutely love it. And it's about, the one, finding the one, which I previously described as being it's a bad idea. It's a bad idea that has, I think, ruined a great many lives. But that's what this is about. But it's also a movie about, personal growth. In particular, the personal growth of the character, Niccolo, or Nicky Ferrante, played by Cary Grant. Now, Cary Grant was, he was born in 1904, and so he was not a young man when this movie was made. He was 53 years old. But there's, certain type of men who can get away with that sort of thing, and Cary Grant was another one. Billy Wilder was criticized for putting in Love in the Afternoon Gary Cooper together with Audrey Hepburn, and some people said that Gary Cooper was too old, and Billy Wilder scoffed at that notion, saying that Gary Cooper could get any woman he wanted. And Cary Grant, much the same way. We learned that Nicky Ferrante is a notorious international playboy. He just flits from beautiful rich woman to rich woman to rich woman, and they fall madly in love with him. And he says that, at the beginning, I put them up on a pedestal, and then it's like this. It comes down. He's an exceedingly selfish man. And, it's explained of him by his grandmother, who is this is an absolutely adorable performance by Kathleen Nesbitt. She was only 13 years older than him when the film was made. That there's a bill coming due because everything has come so easy for him, that he was talented in art, painting, and in music, piano. But he just decided that he didn't want to work. He's the handsomest man on earth, and rich women throw themselves at him. Well, what's a man going to do? Right? So this movie is, most of it is shot, about half of it is shot on an ocean liner, the SS Constitution, in a voyage from Europe to America. Rich people used to like to do that, to spend weeks crossing the Atlantic instead of taking an airplane. Of course, air travel was much more dangerous then than it is now, which might be one reason, but people liked the idea of relaxing. And of course, ocean liners then, like the Constitution, were much different than they are now. This is very, very expensive. So you're not going to get, hoi polloi on these voyages. So, Nicky Ferrante, everyone knows Nicky Ferrante. Everyone on the ship seems to know who he is. He's a celebrity, even though he has accomplished nothing in his life. And he is engaged to be married to one of the richest women in America, named Lois Clark, played by Neva Patterson. And there's a painful phone call he gets. Apparently, you could call ocean liners. Must have been very expensive, some sort of radio relay. And it's a French woman who was absolutely furious with him. All the promises that he made, and I love you, and I love you, and I love you. And he pretends that the call has been cut off. He takes this rather well, this barrage of insults. And we know how she had thought about him because there's a running gag in the film about his cigarette case. And I'll explain that back in the day, smokers of, refinement and taste and I guess, funds didn't take cigarettes out of the boxes or packs because that would be déclassé. They would have a case that one could slip into a breast pocket that was made, of pewter or silver. If one had the funds, presumably gold, if one was quite well off. And, to offer cigarettes to guests, there would be a box which would open up. And the cigarette box that opens up is a major plot point in the movie The Shop Around the Corner, which I'm going to be discussing in a few weeks. So Cary Grant has lost his cigarette case, and it turns out that it's ended up in the hands of Deborah Carr, who plays a woman called Terry McKay. Deborah Carr is one of the greatest movie stars, like Cary Grant, and she is a magnificent woman. She looks absolutely ravishing in this film. It's just one outstanding outfit after another, and the costume design by Charles Lemaire was nominated for an Academy Award. She is, let's say, she's no spring chicken. She was born in 1921, and I don't know the kind of woman that Cary Grant would be drawn to. Well, she's kind of a mystery because she appears wearing furs and these fabulous gowns, but she doesn't really like to talk about herself. And it turns out that she's from Boston and that she had started as a nightclub singer. And 5 years earlier, she had met a rich businessman who presumably showered her with all of these gifts. And now she is engaged to be married to him, just as Cary Grant is engaged to the rich woman in New York. And so they are both on vacation. Deborah Carr's fiance decided, to give her a little treat because, the wedding was going to be exhausting. So how about you have a nice vacation at my expense? Cary Grant learns that essentially Terry McKay she doesn't have her own money, which means that, she's not really in Cary Grant's league, But he sees something in her. It's not just her beauty and her elegance, but her intelligence, her solidity. She's a solid person, and she seems to be a moral person. I mean, Leo McCarey, he knew the world. His movies weren't smutty, but there's no pretense that the sexual relations between men and women are anything other than they are. And it's pretty obvious that Cary Grant wants to have sex with her pretty much right from the get-go, and Deborah Kerr isn't having it. And this makes him more attracted to her than he had previously been. She knows all about him. There's a subplot in the movie that we have this famous man on board, and he is seen getting very friendly with a woman who is not his fiancée, and pictures are taken by an employee of the cruise line who makes money selling prints of them. They're being snapped up, which is, as I say, very embarrassing indeed. But both Cary Grant and Deborah Kerr have the same dilemma, because if they choose each other rather than their prospective fiancés, they will be spurning millions and millions of dollars. In fact, Cary Grant's fiancée is so rich, we later learn she has a Modigliani, in her mansion or penthouse apartment or whatever. And not very many people can afford a Modigliani. So Cary Grant talks to Deborah Kerr. He mentions a grandmother, and Deborah Kerr doesn't really believe he has a grandmother. And so the ship makes a stop at Villefranche, and it turns out that Cary Grant does have a grandmother, and she's this charming old biddy, as I said, grandmother Janou, played by Kathleen Nesbitt, a venerable old English actress who was once engaged to Rupert Brooke. They didn't get married because, of course, he was killed in the First World War. So they go to visit her villa, and Terry is quite taken aback by, how what a beautiful place it is. Also, she learns a great deal about Cary Grant, that he is, he's French or French Italian, that his late father had been, grandfather had been a diplomat. We don't hear about the generation between. But grandmother Janou is absolutely, she's moved to tears by Cary Grant's visit, that he doesn't visit very often, I suppose. And she thinks the world of him, although she's not deluded about what kind of man he is. And the joy that Catherine Nesbitt displays in, finally seeing Nikki after all this time is really beautiful to behold. Also, when the couple leave, her sadness, because she realizes at the age of 82 that this is likely to be the last time that she will ever see her favorite grandson. And the grandmother takes a very close interest in Terry McKay. She is quite taken with her, because she realizes that this is the kind of woman that her grandson really should be with, a person of quality. We have a religious aspect that enters the film at this point, because the grandmother has a chapel, a private chapel at her villa, and Terry avails herself of it. We see her praying before a statue of the Virgin Mary, and Cary Grant, Nikki, had thought that, we knew that Terry was very interested in art, in beauty, so perhaps she was simply checking out the chapel to see, to look at the fittings and the like. And he is rather ashamed when he sees her kneeling and praying, and he kneels down beside her and prays as well. And the obvious implication is that he, we later is confirmed that he was raised Catholic, but had abandoned this in his adolescence. So there is no coupling that goes on during the ocean voyage. And a silly, a preposterous promise is made at the end of the voyage that 6 months after their arrival, if it hasn't worked out or if they've thought better about their prospective marriages, they will get together, they will meet. And where will they meet? Well, they will meet at the top of the Empire State Building, because as Terry says, it's the nearest thing to heaven in New York City. And, well, it doesn't work out. That Deborah Kerr doesn't show. And the reasons why she doesn't show, that's kept rather obscure. But we learn that it wasn't really her choice not to show. Now, Nikki takes this very badly indeed, especially since that Deborah Kerr seems to have broken off all contact with him. And, well, she has to earn a living because she has broken off the engagement with her fiance. And I must say, one of the things that I really appreciate about this movie, unlike the quasi remake made by Nora Ephron, is that the rejected partners are not shown to be, ridiculous or reprehensible people. Both Terry's fiance and Nikki's fiance seem to be good people. Just, didn't work out. Now, of course, Leo McCarey, I suppose, rather wrote the book about sentimental Catholicism with his two enormous hits, starring Bing Crosby in 1944 and 1945, Going My Way and The Bells of St. Mary's. And a lot of people have criticized the sentimental Catholicism in An Affair to Remember. It doesn't bother me at all because it's far better than the alternative that we are faced with today. Terry gets a job teaching music to a bunch of lovable street urchins in New York City. And a very diverse lot they are. And the cuteness and gawkiness of the children is just pushed to the maximum. But again, it doesn't bother me at all. Cary Grant, he has to earn a living. And, he's a talented painter, but too self-critical. Also, he had no need to sell any paintings. But now he has to. And again, this is very improbable. In the space of, 6 months or so, a little over 6 months, he becomes a highly successful painter, even though he insists on not using his real name, because famous people who paint, Winston Churchill is an example. He wasn't a very good painter, but people bought his paintings because it's signed Winston Churchill. But no, Nikki becomes something of a sensation in the art world. And this is like The Shop Around the Corner. This is a movie associated with Christmas because the climax of the film is at Christmas. And Nikki finally tracks down Terry. And he knows something about her that she doesn't know that he knows. And if you haven't seen the film, I'm not going to spoil the ending for you, but it is, as I say, this is a weepy, this is, I suppose, the most romantic ending to any film ever made. I love this film. It is so witty and intelligent. It is so understanding of human nature. The photography by Milton Krasner is absolutely gorgeous. The music, I don't know. The title song is sung by Vic Damone, not one of my favorites, but I have to say, I'm really impressed by Vic Damone's range in this song. I didn't think he'd be able to hit that high note at the end. McCary, I think, is seriously underrated, despite all of the great films that he has made. Some others that I haven't mentioned include The Awful Truth, which won Oscar for Best Picture, And Leo McCarey said, "You gave it to me for the wrong picture." He was referring to Make Way for Tomorrow. And Ruggles of Red Gap, which stars Charles Laughton in a very, very touching role, not the kind of role that he usually played. To give an example of McCary's genius as a filmmaker, I'll just point to one shot, that the first kiss between Cary Grant and Deborah Carr is on a staircase. And we see Deborah Carr coming up the stairs, and we see Cary Grant going down the stairs, but the camera is positioned from the side, so we only see them up to the waist, and we know that they're kissing, but we can't see them do it, which I thought that was really novel and impressive. Fair to Remember. You can watch it on Amazon Prime. It's available in a very handsome digibook Blu-ray from whom? 20th Century Fox. Yeah, well, hurry while stocks last, because 20th Century Fox has, of course, been bought by the Devil Mouse, and the Devil Mouse likes to put films in the vault. Also, it just infuriates me that, they call it 20th Century now because it's Disney now. We're just going to efface the memory of the great Fox studio. But you can get, as I say, Fair to Remember, the Blu-ray print is just stunning looking. And this digibook has written essays and tons of extras on it, including commentary. And one of the commenters is the great Marni Nixon, who sang. She pretended to be lots of famous people in films, lots and lots and lots. And she was her first husband was Ernest Gold, the famous movie composer, who wrote the score for Exodus, among others. But it seems to me that buying a Blu-ray of An Affair to Remember would be a very nice Christmas present for a woman in your life, because I'm told that women are very fond of this movie. It's sometimes referred to as a chick flick. But I'll tell you this, if you watch this film, you will notice just how degenerated the rom-com formula has become. And this film, An Affair to Remember, is the rom-com at its very best. They say they don't make films like that anymore. Well, they don't. But you can still watch it. Let's have a final look at the chat. Media Hit says, in the movie To Live and Die in L.A., the scene where William Dafoe's girlfriend is introduced, you see her kiss her, and she looks like a man from behind. That's because it was a guy in the scene playing her. Yes, I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to that film. I love that film. Let's see. Popcasso 88 says Cary Grant was married to Diane Cannon. Yes, and he also took LSD. Popcasso 88 says, weren't Grant and Randolph Scott roommates? I've never believed all these stories about Randolph Scott, frankly. Who else do we have? Still looked good in the 90s, and even 00s didn't wreck her looks with cosmetic surgery. Susanna Hoffs. I'm very fond of Susanna Hoffs. She's a great singer, and she's a pretty good songwriter. She plays the guitar. She was in the Bangles, severely underrated group. You had 4 women who could play, sing, and write. When are you ever going to find that again? And Susanna Hoffs has aged very well indeed. And one says, speaking of ocean liner movies, anyone ever see Juggernaut? It's about a bomb on a cruise liner. Pretty good movie with a great cast, including Cyril Cusack in his usual small part. Cyril Cusack, the Irishman, one of the great actors. Yes, Popcasso 88 agrees with me. Susanna Hoffs was smoking hot and still looks good. All the women in that band, well, the original 4, were all good looking. Yes, the Bangles covered Hazy Shade of Winter, produced by Rick Rubin, for the soundtrack to Less Than Zero. And I loved Simon and Garfunkel's version, and I love this version too. It's pretty hard rocking. Okay. I don't recall it being as good as Kevin suggests, but I'd watch it again. James Spader said Andrew McCarthy was once asked, "Who is that guy that always plays assholes in your movie?" James Spader is an exceedingly nasty person in Less Than Zero. Andrew McCarthy, I don't know. He sort of had this one look, where he looks wounded, I'm wounded. Women love that, right? I mean, Andrew McCarthy was in a lot of movies, in the 80s, where romantic lead, and, he always looked the same. Robert Downey Jr., it's funny. If you look at the beginning of his career, there's a whole bunch of movies where Robert Downey Jr. plays the new wave guy. Even in What Weird Science, he's the new wave guy. Okay. And James Spader, yes, media hits. He was on The Office, there was an episode of The Office on. It's on for several hours every day on the limited list of channels I get here. And I guess it was around season 5 that the show just became horrible, absolutely horrible. And I can't say that Ed Helms is entirely to blame, but I'm trying to think of a character on a sitcom who, was more obnoxious than Ed Helms in The Office, and I'm kind of drawing a blank. Oh, but he's supposed to be lovable. No, he's not lovable. He is the opposite of lovable. And the fact that, he ends up with the receptionist, Ellie Kemper. No, I'm sorry. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Spader is kind of reasonable in Less Than Zero, as I recall. He is owed a lot of money. Yes, he is owed a lot of money. I don't want to talk about how that money is paid back because it's too horrifying. But okay, that's it for today. I'm going to be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, and I am going to be discussing a book about the pharmaceutical industry. And it's a book that raises a lot of parallels to certain pharmaceutical companies today, like Pfizer, for example. And of course, Arthur Sackler was very heavily involved with Pfizer. We got these pills called Librium and Valium, and they make you feel good. Your problems just fly away. Addictive? Why would a pill like that become addictive? They kept this up for over a decade. They kept it up until they went out of patent protection. So thank you all for tuning in. If you would like to support the live stream with a donation, which much appreciated, especially at this unsettled time in my life, my PayPal account is linked to Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you're in Canada, donations may be made directly via interact@kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse. I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.